everyone, and welcome to our Conversations with series. And it is June, which means it's Pride Month, and we are talking to a fantastic group of people who are going to share their stories with EDS and HSD, and also what it's like to have that as part of the 2SLGBTQIA plus community. So we're going to kick in. As many of you may know, I'm Lara Bloom. I'm President and CEO of the Ehlers-Danlos Society. I identify as a gay woman, and I came out when I was 16 and went back in the closet and came out again when I was 21. And I think that my experience has definitely impacted getting a diagnosis. I think it was harder. I think a lot of what I went through and was going through as a teenager was put down to anxiety and depression from struggling with my identity and who I was. And I think that made that process a lot longer. And I'm sure that will be echoed amongst our panel today. But enough about me. I'd like to hear about everyone here. So Elliot, I'm going to come to you first. If you could just share with everyone your personal journey with EDS or HSD and how that intersects with your identity.
Sure. My name is Elliot Joseph Pippin. I was just recently got my formal diagnosis for hypermobility spectrum disorder. But my relationship to EDS and HSD goes back way before that. Before I even got my diagnosis or even was recognizing symptoms, I was a queer studies minor in my undergrad, and I focused on the intersectionality between disability and queer identity. And what I found a lot of, just by happenstance, was a lot of people on the internet that I was following also had EDS and were also queer or trans or in the LGBTQIA identities. And I just saw that interesting trend and kind of just looked into that. And I really love neuroqueer theory, which is the idea about the intersectionality between specifically neurodivergency and queer identity. And that kind of spread into disability justice and disability studies. And then it just so happened that I started to exhibit some symptoms of EDS. And since I was already knowledgeable, I was like, oh boy, this kind of looks pretty familiar. And lo and behold, I have it too. So I am also part of that trend that I was seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you find, I often hear anecdotally in forums and our events that people think that there is a higher prevalence of LGBTQIA people in the EDS and HSD community, and we don't have any research or evidence to explain that. Do you see that? And did you also find that when you were doing your studies?
Yeah, the correlations that I was seeing specifically was the high rate of the comorbidity of neurodivergency and EDS and HSD, and how people who are neurodivergent tend to be more likely to be queer and neurodivergent, or queer or trans, because of the less stringent ideas about societal norms. And so that's just my connection. Of course, I've never done full research on it, although I would love to. But that's just my little findings as an undergrad.
Thank you. Thank you. Annie, I'm going to come to you now. Same question.
All righty. Yeah, my name is Annie Segarra. I identify as queer, lesbian, non-binary, gender fluid. And I came out as queer when I was 19, and I started becoming very sick, unable to stand for more than 5 minutes at a time when I was about 23 years old, and had a big operation on my leg because they had this idea that there was an issue with my joints and they could put metals in my foot and in my leg to fix it, but it made things worse. And around that time, I started to use a wheelchair the majority of the time and a cane some of the time. And now it's a bit more varied. After becoming officially diagnosed with CEDS when I was 26. It took about 3 years of pushing, of investigating and pushing doctors, because along the 3-year span, I had found a disabled community online and the EDS community online, and all these symptoms were matching. And I would start documenting my daily symptoms, bringing them to doctors and saying, like, so these are the symptoms that they're saying this is called, this is what I'm also experiencing, so I think this is what I have, and being told no a lot, that it's too rare and that I couldn't possibly have it. But after like a long time and lots of tears, I finally saw a geneticist who did my blood tests, and the classical EDS came out through there, thank goodness, even though the majority of doctors were very uninformed about how like textbook my symptoms were. So yeah, with EDS, I also have the co-occurring conditions like POTS. I'm also autistic, which we were just talking about, like the how often we find like neurodivergent and Ehlers-Danlos connective tissue, and queerness, like all in one. I would say that in my social circles, like I can't think of a straight, name a straight. I cannot. They're all queer, trans, neurodivergent, and chronically ill, right, with like connective tissue stuff. So it is very interesting.
Absolutely. Stevie, how about you?
Sorry, that's my doorbell.
Life goes on, right? Even behind the Zoom.
Hi, I'm Stevie Boebi. I make videos on the internet about queer sex, dating, relationships type stuff. So I was definitely like out as a lesbian way before coming out as disabled, as chronically ill, as having EDS. But it's funny that Annie was just talking, because I basically was either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for so long. And so I just like posted a list of every symptom I'd ever experienced that was weird. And Annie was one of the first people that reached out to me. And yeah, we became friends, but I still just like didn't think that it could be EDS for some reason. But yeah, I do think that queer people, but like, yes, I can't name a straight with EDS, you know what I mean? But like, I am only mostly around queer people. But I do think that it might be easier to like come out as having a condition when you're queer, because we have like that history with coming out, and there's already an understanding of marginalization and oppression and lack of access within our queer communities. And so I find myself, I don't know, being able to have a back and forth much easier with queer people when I talk about disability stuff, as opposed to when I'm in like more cishet spaces. But I don't know, it's just my thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And I think there's definitely been more looked into about the correlations between EDS, HSD and neurodiversity, but adding that queer dimension in, I think, is really fascinating. And also what I find interesting, and I know has been thought about when approaching hormone studies, is the impact that the drugs that you take when you're transitioning impact on symptoms. And I wonder, Elliot, if you could speak to that at all, if you found that things improved, and if we can learn from our trans friends on perhaps if testosterone low doses could be something for the future.
Yeah. So having just received my formal diagnosis like literally 2 months ago, and just now hearing about this like recent research, right? This formal research, something about like how hormones can impact EDS and connective tissue. I actually started my physical transition when I was around 16 years old. So this was before I was recognizing any of my symptoms as problematic. I grew up doing tons of sports, at least 1 or 2 for every season, very active academically and just extracurricularly. So I think What I've learned now is that I was running my body so ragged that I wasn't even being able to recognize the pain that I was in as abnormal. And so when I started testosterone when I was 16, I was already having knee pain, which I just thought was normal for a 16-year-old, but turns out that's not true. And so I wasn't able really to recognize whether or not it helped or not, because now at this point, now the point that I'm recognizing HSD and like my symptoms, I've been on testosterone for 10 years. So I don't actually really know what's, for me personally, like what had changed, if anything, because I wasn't yet recognizing what was wrong.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Annie, Stevie, have you heard on the queer grapevine if any
Yeah.
things are impacting?
Yeah, the majority of like my trans masculine friends who have EDS have commented that their symptoms have um gotten better, improved since starting taking testosterone. So I don't know. I talk about this quite a bit. My partner is also trans feminine, and like we talk about ADS and transness a lot. She's also hypermobile, but not diagnosed with anything, and it doesn't experience any pain so far in life through her hypermobility. So this is a topic that comes up a lot. We talk about so in my gender fluidity, like the discussion of like taking hormones, or something that has been on the table for me at times have been like top surgery and things like that. But as I mentioned, I had a very life altering operation about a decade ago. Wow, I'm just realizing. And part of the the life altering ness of it is that I wasn't diagnosed yet when I had it, and the anesthesia stopped working, and that's like a part of, you know, a lot of EDSers experience, is that like we're kind of what's the word, stubborn to anesthesia. Like it doesn't work for us as well as like biotypical bodies at times. And so I woke up and I felt everything, and then painkillers won't work. So it was really like physically, mentally traumatizing to like feel all the slices of everything, and to like not be able to stop that pain. And also another thing I learned about EDS is like how surgeries, operations can be more complicated with our connective tissues, with our recovery. And so my recovery time should have just been like 3 months, and it was about a bit more than half a year where the floor was lava. My nerves were all like opened up, and I couldn't even touch the ground, like a toe to water. Like I couldn't make any contact without like excruciating amounts of pain. So that recovery process and the operation process makes me really hesitant to like voluntarily get any kind of surgical procedures. So yeah, so that's something that like I have to take into consideration in the intersection of like EDS and queerness, transness specifically, when we're talking about any kind of procedure like that. But yeah, through the grapevine, have heard about the change, and I guess like we definitely need more research on like estrogen versus testosterone, and like how those hormones impact our symptoms, and why it's necessarily the fact that like the more estrogen, the more symptomatic, or other way around. And it's not even necessary, because you could have testosterone and still be incredibly sick, incredibly symptomatic. But like it's an interesting thing to examine, and that we need more research on.
Absolutely. Stevie, I love that you talked about the fact that you got some answers from connecting with Annie online. Love that you're both here together. That's wonderful. Can you talk about the importance of community and support networks in your journey?
Oh yeah. I mean, God, what would I or most of us have done if we didn't have the internet? Like, oh, just so much community building. So many Facebook groups that are so specific. Like I'm in some like pregnancy EDS Facebook groups because I'm a doula for like as a side gig for people who are hypermobile. So yeah, and then just being able to find Annie and other content creators that are queer and have EDS just helped me so much. I don't know, I might still be undiagnosed if it wasn't for them, you know, because I kind of had to like demand my diagnosis, really like demand a geneticist appointment to then finally be diagnosed in 2018. But yeah, I can't even express how important the internet and community building online and all of that is, especially for people who are chronically ill and struggle to like much access public spaces, much less you know, feel well enough to be outside. And now in you know, the COVID atmosphere, yeah, I'm obsessed with the World Wide Web, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it can bring so much good. We hear about all the challenges and the negative things associated with it, but for some, their life is, you know, dependent on it, and having those connections and those answers, and it can be so important. Elliot, what has been your experience in accessing that kind of gender affirming care with EDS and HSD, and what advice would you give to other trans individuals navigating those kind of similar health challenges?
Yeah, I definitely can speak to this, especially someone who experienced a bit of medical trauma as a minor, because I started my medical transition before I was 18. I was around 15 when I started trying to take hormones and trying to get top surgery. And some of the things I experienced, I think, would have been um, a little bit easier to understand if I had known about my HSD, because I had a lot of unexplained symptoms. Like I was like basically deathly allergic to hormone blockers. It sent me to the ER twice, which is like, why? And I was at one of the top hospitals in my area, at the children's hospital. So like I had access to all kinds of medical information, and they could not explain to me why this had happened. And so that like put a wrench in not just my transition, but like my medical experiences, because I was experiencing abnormal symptoms. I was getting like random rashes, and all these things could have helped been explained if I had been able to listen to my body more and know like some of the things were off, or if the medical professionals I was interacting with had known about kind of like the intersectionality between transness and queerness and HSD and hypermobility, maybe done a few more tests in that vein. It also definitely could have helped because when I had top surgery, I actually had to have emergency surgery immediately after because I had a hematoma, and it found out that I had von Willebrand's, and that was not something that had previously been on my radar because I was not exhibiting any other symptoms, and it was just one of those things that it happened because I had major surgery, but could have also we could have maybe prepared more for potential problems if I had known that I had underlying conditions to begin with.
I'm muted. Sorry, my daughter was running around in the garden screaming, so I thought I'd mute. Just another rare condition to add to the list there. That's wow. So Annie, what role do you think social media plays in raising awareness and building that community that Stevie spoke about? I mean, it's pretty important from what we see, but talk to me more about that.
For sure. I think to echo Stevie, like for so many of us with chronic illness, social media can be our entire world, especially if we're homebound or bedbound. That is how we experience the world. That is how we unite with our friends, with our loved ones. That is how we have access to resources, to information, to tools. When I got officially diagnosed, I was waiting for an official diagnosis to like really talk about Ehlers-Danlos and everything that I was learning about it. But prior to that, I was documenting online my process of like being undiagnosed and chronically ill and like what that looks like. And I was trapped in my room for years, like just being sick and asking for help and not getting any, and just being stuck in there. Social media it equals access, solidarity, love. It equates to it. Like without social media, I wouldn't have been able to fundraise for my first wheelchair because I was sick and unable to work, stuck in my room. And in order to leave my room, I needed a wheelchair and I couldn't afford one. So it took me like a full year of like trying to raise the money for one on a GoFundMe, I think it was. But that's you know, the folks that are most aware of how difficult it is to financially access the mobility aids that you need and the healthcare that you need. They're the ones that are typically the most there for you. And it's through the internet that we make those connections with those people, because a lot of them are just like us, mostly at home and experiencing a very similar thing. And I think when you witness each other doing that, when someone like myself or anyone else who's doing a similar thing is documenting what it's like to be chronically ill and what are the tools that we use that help us get by, or like using a stool in the kitchen, or like the little hacks we have to clean our rooms and things like that. It's like creating a map to help one another navigate something that we like never get to see any representation for, because without representation we are mapless, we are lost in the wilderness, just feeling so isolated in the experience, and that can be really scary. So social media provides that kind of light, I guess, for all of us to be able to survive it.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. I think that's spot on for sure. Stevie, you
I'd
had
like
a
to. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
please, Elliot, go ahead.
I would love
Please.
to add on. I
Yeah.
could. I also agree with everything that Annie has said. And you're actually one of the people that I was following before I got my diagnosis, because I was looking desperately for Black and brown people that either before was like just Black and brown disabled people, because I just was trying to diversify what I was seeing online. And then it just so happened that the people I was following also had EDS, and that's just coincidence. But I think I mean, I would not have been nearly as prepared, as much as you can be prepared for becoming disabled, if I had not been following disabled creators before I became disabled myself, and learning about disability justice, about just like the history, especially, I mean, I live in the US, so about the history of the disability rights in the US, and just listening and not putting my own input in, and just hearing from the community that I was at the time not a part of, was incredibly helpful for me, because I was not afraid of disability when it struck me in the face. I mean, it sucks. It's not fun, but I was not afraid of becoming disabled. I was not, because I knew that there was a beautiful, welcoming community already there waiting for me. As soon as it happened, I was like, I don't have to worry about not having a place. And I know it's going to be hard, but at least I have these beautiful people on the internet and the community I've built in person as well.
Elliot, I'm gonna freaking cry because you've just said everything that like I wish that like I've literally said that about sharing our experiences online, that I want to do it because I want people to feel safe, to know that if ever disability thrusts itself upon your life, that there is community for you, and that there is a whole culture, and that it's not like the end or pitiful or whatever. And even within the community, we have to deal with a lot of internalized ableism, which like recently, like it's been hitting me a lot. I think because of like, you know, global events, like your vulnerabilities are more like on mind, you know. But that, yeah, that to hear like out of your mouth that like that is exactly what happened, that from like being able to see other disabled people online, to hear the words, yeah, I wasn't scared to become disabled, like it's so like it honors me. Thank you for saying that.
It sounds like, Annie, you've been a real lighthouse to so many, so thank you for reaching so many people and getting them into, you know, a safe place. Steve.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful to share this space with you here. I had no idea you were going to be a part of this, so it was really pleasant to see your face and be like, oh my gosh, I recognize who that is. And I've heard your story, and it's so nice to hear it from you personally.
Damn. Thank you.
It's a safe space. We can let it all out. Thank you. So Stevie, I know you had an online presence before your diagnosis. And what do you think your experience with your EDS diagnosis, how do you think that shapes now your online presence and the advocacy work that you do? Because you wear quite a lot of hats online of what you're representing and what you're advocating for. How has it shaped you?
Yeah, it is kind of funny because I was basically forced to create a way to work online because of how ill I was. But none of my content was around that because I was closeted. Like I was not public about any of my health struggles until 2018. I did feel like I needed to have a real diagnosis before I could even talk about it online, which probably shouldn't have been how I felt, but that's how it happened. But yeah, I don't know, like if in an alternate universe I didn't have EDS and wasn't disabled, didn't have a chronic illness, I don't know if I would have the career that I have. So I guess part of it was in like kind of a negative way, as far as like I'm not able to do jobs, using my body in the world. So moving it online to where I can work from bed if I want. I can have my own business where I can have my schedule be around me and what my ability is day to day. Sorry, I forgot the question. Oh yeah. So in basically like 2006, 2007 was when I started working online. And it was because I had EDS, but I didn't make any content about EDS because I didn't even know what that was until I met Annie. But yeah, now it is interesting because I did build a platform and had, a career having nothing to do with disability, chronic illness, or anything. And so finding ways to incorporate that into my content. I've been a bit slow to do it, I think. But lately I've been making more and more stuff. Now I finally got a power chair for the first time. So I'm making like more content about that. And yeah, the response has been really great. And I think, since everybody with EDS is queer, that really worked out because my audience is like, oh yeah, wow, I have that too. Just kidding. There's a couple straights in there somewhere, right?
Apparently.
We've heard, it's rumored.
Rumored. Yeah. Thank you. So I mean, at the beginning I talked a little bit about how I feel that being gay presented a challenge in me accessing my diagnosis for a start and healthcare. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 24. I was symptomatic from the age of 11. So they're like the pivotal years of where so much change is happening. And when I was going to school, I was you know, I went to an all-girls school. I was the only one really wearing trousers. I had short hair. You know, people were telling me I was gay before I understood what that meant, and I had time to process that, and it was done in a negative way. And when I was 15, 16, 17, they were the most symptomatic years of my life. And when you're going to the doctor with such multi-systemic issues, and you're presenting as somebody who may be struggling, you know, with my short hair and my trousers, and they were like, oh, well, that's why, you know, you've got everything that you've got going on. And I really do think it delayed things for me, and it created a challenge that wouldn't have been there if I had have looked like everyone else and presented like all my other friends. And I wondered, and this is open to anyone who feels comfortable sharing, what challenges you felt being from our community have presented in accessing either a diagnosis or that care. Who would like
to share?
Yeah.
So I actually feel kind of the opposite, that because I experienced so much medical mysteries during my early transition as a teenager, I learned very quickly how to advocate for myself in a doctor's office, and how I just, in a lot of cases, had to tell the doctor what I needed, because I was not otherwise going to be listened to, especially as a young Black trans person. I was just brought to be dismissed in an office. And luckily, I had a supportive parent who was willing to be my backup in doctor's offices, and that taught me how to advocate for myself. So by the time I was going to doctor's appointments by myself and having to advocate for my health on my own, I felt very comfortable going into a doctor's office and saying what needed to be said. Um, and so while I wish I hadn't had to fight for my life in doctor's offices since I was 16, I got the skills to be able to, and like I had compared to other people's journey, a rapid diagnosis. It took less than a year. I found the symptoms. I already had the resources. I knew how to advocate for myself, and luckily I had a really wonderful primary care physician who is actually, I see through a queer health center. So that's a direct connection between my queer identity and my diagnosis. And right now, like, there is no other primary care physician available for complex diagnoses, and so I'm happy to stay with the one I have because of how well she's been able to advocate for me. And I don't think I would have gotten a doctor as able to advocate for me if I wasn't going to a queer health center, because not once has she ever said, "Are you sure this is just something related to your being transgender or your sexual activity or whatever?" Like, and a lot of other doctors' offices that where I was being seen that weren't trans specific, not queer specific, where they were constantly, when I was like, I have an earache, they're like, "Are you sure it's not because you're transgender?" Like, I don't have to worry about that with my having my primary care physician be through a queer space.
That's great. Anyone else want to share any challenges they may have faced?
I think for me, like, my observation of like obstacle also related to mental health, and there was just a lot going on. You could probably definitely intertwine it with like I was a closeted or like unable to really find myself as a child in my queerness and my transness at all, because I had a lot of other obstacles on my plate. Really, I had a kind of I was dealing with being a parentified child at home, taking care of like younger siblings, and like an abusive situation at home. So I didn't really have I guess the time to like be like, who am I attracted to? I was like a 12-year-old taking care of like little kids, and like had a lot of other stuff on my plate. But so when you are disconnected with yourself, that among everything else that was going on, my mental health wasn't great. But like I think there was definitely amongst the issues in my environment, there was a certain neglect, whether it be from parental figures or like staff members at school, that like they would witness symptoms and they would dismiss it as something else. So it had a lot to do with being perceived as a girl, for one thing, and also probably a bit of fat phobia, because they would like, if I was having issues keeping up with physical fitness, they'd be like, oh, it's just because you're overweight and like you're out of shape and da da da. So there was it felt like any pain that I experienced, any like POTS symptoms that I experienced was like explained away. And in medical spaces, I definitely feel like, you know, just being perceived as a woman like is a huge hindrance, because you're taken so less seriously in those spaces a lot of the time. And only recently have I experienced like tricky like trans related questions in medical spaces, like the gynecologist, where like they asked me about sexual activity. I'm like, and what my orientation is, and they're like, and is it, are you having heterosex or homosex? And I'm like, it's homo, but are you asking me that because you need to know what genitals are touching what genitals, or are you asking me the gender of my partner? So like, you know, there can be like those kinds of obstacles as well in medical spaces.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm talking to people who understand how important it is to share strategies and resources online, because so often people don't have access to see a healthcare professional for sometimes years in their area. They have to wait a long time. And so we rely on forums and safe spaces online. So I want to come to each of you, and I know that this will be a tough one, but if you could only pick 3 of your top strategies and resources, what would they be? Who feels comfortable to start?
Can I start off with saying one? I can't think of 3 so quickly. But,
Hit me with one. I'll be happy with one.
I think like one of my greatest resources is surrounding myself with like affirming loved ones regarding disability and queerness and transness. I am surrounded by friends who are extremely affirming. If ever like just in the past month or so, like if I was feeling kind of gender dysphoria, like I'll have someone in my life who is like, let me come over, let's dress up and get like really like in it, and we'll take photos and like feel better about ourselves. And friends who like understand that I use different pronouns at different times and different names at different times, and like we'll like use all those in, you know, in variety with me. And I'm like, this is beautiful, and it makes me feel safe and affirmed and seen by my loved ones. And in the same way that it is in regards to my gender fluidity, they'll be equally as affirming with like disability. And I'll have what probably a lot of us go through. I'll have like an internalized ableism moments, and I'll have burden complex moments, and like difficulty asking for help, and difficulty accepting help if someone offers. But like the people that I have around me are very understanding about things like that, and so will give me opportunity, like, hey, can I help you out with that? And I'll say, no, I'm fine, and try to do it on my own, and they'll give me the, are you sure? And I'm like, Yeah, okay, I could use the help right now. Thank you I just like impulsively I try to like handle things on my own, and it's a hyper independence issue. And trying to like, I don't know, hold on to my autonomy when I can, that's something that you want to hold on to when you feel like you're losing so much ability. But I know that in the long run, accepting help is self-care, is protecting myself. And so that's the journey I'm on with that. And my friends are very supportive. So like just trying to like, curate your life to make you feel as safe and affirmed as possible. That would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you. Stevie.
Yeah, I would say mainly Annie's YouTube channel is so amazing. Great, great long form and short form content. Great, A+. That's the first one. But I also found a recent one lately called Hypermobility HQ, and it's run by Alex, and she's an osteopath, but it's just like, it's a Discord server and also like live podcast once a week, where, I don't know, it's just full of a bunch of like nerds with hypermobility. So like, it's like separated in a bunch of different categories. If it's like, oh, I have this weird rash, you'll find like 17 different sections of like how, like just reading other people's experiences and links to Reddits and all kind of stuff. So yeah, Hypermobility HQ has been really cool. She also makes content on like TikTok and Reels and stuff. But yeah, also echoing everything Annie said about surrounding yourself, not just making it to where like who you follow online and what you look at is affirming, but definitely starting to, build your support network in real life. And that can overlap for a lot of people as well. But spending a lot of time either consuming content or directly speaking with people who have, dissected their internalized ableism and can kind of like, I don't know, so you can feel safe.
Thank you. Elliot.
Yeah, I would say all of those same things, and this will be 3 things in total. So here you go. I love utilizing mutual aid and like buy nothing groups online, and I have created spaces just through going to events and like talking to people. I've been able to create local EDS groups, and so I think utilizing those online spaces is crucial. I mentioned like buy nothing and mutual aid groups because sometimes they don't even have to be disability or EDS related to be helpful. I've been able to get different kind of mobility aids and pregnancy pillows and all sorts of goodies off of buy nothing groups that are just community based and that have been helpful, especially when you're spending extra money on doctor's appointments and things and don't have enough extra to spend on like luxuries like extra pillows and things like that, that are these online resources that are there that a lot of times people don't even know about in their communities that could be really, really helpful.
Great. Thank you. So bringing things to a close now, and we're ever trying to listen and learn and do more at the Ehlers-Danlos Society. And I'd like to know, as honestly as you would like to be, what we as an organization could do more to support the queer community. Are there events? Are there resources? Are there spaces? Are there things that we could do that would have supported you, that would support you in your day-to-day? Love to hear any feedback, because it's only through that that we can keep doing better.
What if you had an EDS Society Pride float and then like a stand at Pride events where we do the bait and score and do like little, not real research studies, but like cute ones where it's like, let's see how many people based on this, everyone at Pride, how many of us meet the bait and score?
Oh my God, you would find so many people.
That's
how funny would
that would be so funny.
I love
like,
that idea.
60% of people got more than 4 points on this. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why.
But pause. We do need to make Pride accessible for the EDSers to come first.
Yes.
Yeah.
So first, accessible. We did not get really a chance to touch on that at all, and I wanted to, but I totally, it like slipped my mind about the intersection of like how queer spaces tend to be very physically inaccessible to
You're
those
so
of us with
right. Yeah, let's talk about that. You're so absolutely.
But so I'm glad that happened just now, because yeah, a lot of pride spaces, LGBT spaces, queer spaces are really disappointingly inaccessible. Like, and also sorry, Pride is in June and so many of us have pots and we cannot handle the heat.
No, don't do it. I am one of the only people that hates the cold so much more than heat. Don't change it to the winter time.
I'm not asking for that. I'm just whining. Just whining. I can barely get out of the house in the summertime without passing out. I am trying new POTS medication, so we'll see if it helps. But Lord, the heat intolerance is hard, and I live in Florida, so yikes for me. It gets well for multiple reasons. Yes, ha ha ha. Multiple reasons. Okay. So it gets very hot here. That's the point. So then like of course like there's a lot of like walking and crowds, and there's like a difficulty of trying to even like get there, find a parking spot. In my experience, I've been very well. I'm still practicing COVID safety, so I don't really go to clubs. If I did, maybe with an N95 and an ionizer, but I don't really participate at clubs presently. But once upon a time, when I did used to do that, I would try to go to a gay bar, and the best dance floor was on the second floor, and I was already using a wheelchair but ambulatory, so I could try to make that staircase with my cane, but the exertion is a trigger, and by the time I get to the top of the stairs, I'm having major tachycardia, heart rate over 100 beats per minute, and have to take a rest, and then have to find a seat somewhere if you're lucky at a dance club to find a chair. And then one day, randomly, it had been happening about like 5 visits or so, that I would leave my wheelchair near the bottom of the staircase, take my cane up, deal with the tachycardia attack, and then just like hang out with friends up there, finding a seat. And I had already made the journey up, and some security guard told me that my wheelchair could no longer hang out where it usually hangs out. I said, okay, what can we do about that? And he just bluntly goes, you just have to move it. I'm like, okay, where? I don't know. It just can't be there. And then I made that sound. I made it. Okay. I'm chronically ill. I have a condition. If I go down the stairs to move my wheelchair, I don't think I have it in me to come back up. Essentially, you're asking me to leave. And he's like, shrug. So the way that made me feel was awful. And it made me feel really unwelcome in the space. And like, not just that, you know, people, and it's so funny how my brain kind of expands one person to be everybody, but that's how the brain works sometimes. Mm-hmm. This person in my mind became a representation of the space, and it made me feel like the space didn't want me there, didn't care if I was there, but actively didn't want me there. I felt unwanted, and I felt to some extent like that my wheelchair was kind of ruining the vibe for them, or ruining the aesthetic of the space for them. And after that, like, I was like, I really wish that I had it in me to like fight it, to like talk to somebody, but I just felt so discouraged. I'm going to be honest. I was so discouraged and so like wounded by it that I just like left and never came back. However, like outside of even clubs, which queers should not only have clubs as their uniting spaces, even within queer activist spaces, I kind of ran into the same issue where like accessibility was an afterthought. And they would make spaces up a flight of stairs in old buildings with no elevators. And so if you wanted to participate in activism and you had a wheelchair, you aren't able to participate. So definitely, before anything else, I think we have to like advocate for accessibility of queer spaces. And then a part of that, I really wish, we had more COVID care, because so many of us with Ehlers-Danlos are still being very COVID cautious, and for accessibility need like fully masked, well ventilated spaces. And events like that would be great. And if not in-person events, I think if we arranged like specifically some kind of online gathering where like folks at the queer disabled intersection, specifically here queer EDS, queer trans EDS intersection, could find one another, meet one another, share resources, make friends, that would be something that's really cool.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you know how GLAAD used to, or I don't know if they still do, they have like a score. It was about like employment, like you got an A, B, C, or D on how queer friendly different companies were. What if there was an EDS society like zebra quiz or whatever, to where it would be like, okay, London Pride got an F, but LA Pride got a B. And it's based on like the community reporting how accessible different things were, and like different tiers, like a grading system. That could, I don't know if that could be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if
we built it for ourselves.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, I know the organizers for my local Pride are definitely very open to like input. So, and it's not
and it's not what?
it's not accessible. I went in my wheelchair for the first time, and I was like nearly tipped over several times because it's in Pittsburgh, so it's all hills.
I only recently had an experience with that in a trip to Seattle. That was really scary. Yeah, to like try to navigate big inclines with wheels, and you're all by yourself in that little sidewalk. Oh man.
If there's a sidewalk.
If there's a sidewalk. Yeah, I hope that like, by uniting community, because there are so many of us. There's so many queer trans EDSers. I always like to expand it, of course, to disability at large, but like, we're focused on EDS right now. But there's so many of us even just here that I know that there is power in the collective. We always feel so isolated and discouraged when we try to do anything by ourselves. But if we can connect with each other, and the internet is such a great way to do that, I know that there's ways that we can change things for ourselves, and either put pressure on spaces to become accessible or create our own spaces.
No, absolutely. And in case people don't know, we have a Let's Chat series, which is our virtual support groups, and we have one during Pride for the queer community that I would love to see all of you on. That would be wonderful. But could we extend that outside June? That would be nice. I think having more regular opportunities for people to come together. We are launching an app imminently as well, and so I'd love to get your input when we release it. We're going to release a survey at the same time of additional things you'd love to see on it, and I would really value your opinions on that. So once you see what's on offer, please do put your thoughts down of what we could do in addition to that, because I think there's so many different ways that technology can support us and help us. So do keep an eye out for that as well. And we just want to be a safe space and a home for everyone impacted by these conditions. And so whatever you ever think of that we could be doing more of, our door is always open. Mine personally, the organizations, please reach out and tell us what we could be doing more of, less of, or differently. That would enable us to keep ensuring this safe space and this continued dialogue of bringing in that lived experience and using that as the basis of why we do what we do. Wonderful. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank all of you. I'd also like to acknowledge Ryder, who was unable to attend due to some health complications, but to extend our thanks to them for trying to join. Thank you so much to all of you for your time, for your input, for sharing everything you've been through. It's much appreciated. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. We're grateful to you all. Happy Pride.